Hello and welcome to Off the Rails, where we explore Britain's railway history through fascinating and everyday objects. Today we're going to look at WHSmith Station Bookstall. So WHSmith Station Bookstall was actually on platforms 17 and 18 of Waterloo Station. Waterloo Station didn't just have one bookstore, it had 3 or 4. This one was called Waterloo Loop, and WHSmith Bookstalls have been part of station landscaping for over 180 years. They spread around the network as the railway network grew and as passengers found that they had spare time while they were waiting for a train. They needed something to do. So station bookstalls were the solution. And from a station bookstall, you could buy a copy of the latest newspaper, magazine, or book. So the actual history of WHSmith itself as a firm predates the railway network, actually. The firm started back in the 1790s as the first stationers with a London address, and they were a newsagents whose role it was to distribute newspapers around the country. Before railways came, newspapers were distributed by mail coach. So the newspapers were printed generally in London in the morning, then they had to wait 12 hours to the evening when they would be loaded into the post office stagecoaches, and then the stagecoaches would leave London on often bad roads, long distances. It could take up to 2 days for that newspaper to reach Manchester or Liverpool, Glasgow, by which point the news contained within was really old. So what the first W.H. Smith, the first William Henry Smith did was basically buy his own mail coaches. He staffed them with his own men and he left in the morning. So he undercut the post office because he'd set off 12 hours before. So he was really entrepreneurial and he sort of based his whole business on this idea of being first with the news. The younger W.H. Smith, so the son who entered the firm around about 1846, spotted an opportunity to actually distribute the newspapers and the magazines on station platforms through bookstores. W.H. Smith acquired the contract for all of the stations along the London North Western Railway. Then a fortnight later got the Midland Railway contract, and other railway companies followed suit. So very quickly, within a couple of years, W.H. Smith had a monopoly of bookstalls all around the country. And from that monopoly, they were able to standardise and professionalise the bookstall service. So staff were trained, there were special carriages and engines dedicated to transporting and distributing the reading matter around the country. So the legacy of the W.H. Smith Bookstall is, for me, all about the access to information that it brought in to everyday people's lives. Be that access to the day's newspaper, current affairs, latest fashions, latest reading material, and all the benefits that must have had on a really individual level. If you have access to reading material, it is going to have a lot of different and positive benefits. So what we've got here are a couple of examples of the sorts of things that W.H. Smith sold to passengers in the early days. What we have here is a really special item. It's from about 1850, so W.H. Smith's first bookstore was in 1848, and in about 1849 he acquired the book department. And one of the first things that he wanted to do was to produce books for sale in the bookstalls. It's actually printed by W.H. Smith themselves. The title is actually got the railway passenger for first and foremost. It's the Railway Anecdote book. And if I turn to a page at random, you can see that it's split the narrative into small anecdotes, small passages to enable the reading passenger small tidbits of fun and amusement while they're on their journey. WHSmith, although they started off very early producing this sort of dedicated passenger literature, very quickly decided it wasn't for them. And instead they acquired the copyright of popular authors at the time. And we have what's been termed the Yellowback. So the idea behind the covers of these kinds of publications is that they were to attract attention from the travelling public. But it wasn't just sensational fiction that was stocked in WHSmith. Things like self-help books, what we call, I suppose, the classics of literature, were also stocked. The format of these items were a much reduced size, so these lend themselves perfectly to railway travel. So what we've got here is this rather lovely railway reading lamp. If I carefully open, we've got this delightful little box full of matches, and then the candle holder, which would have fit like so. And then you could put that on the page of whatever it was you were reading. Electricity on carriages has not become widespread, so it was gas lighting, oil lighting, and the light that was illuminating the carriages was often flickery and very poor. So having your own personal light source made it easier for you to read your reading material. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome a very special guest today, David Podmore, our Chief Restorer of the WHSmith Bookstall. David, how did you begin to tackle restoring the bookstall? What did you have to mitigate? What did you have to do?
When we first were introduced to the bookstall, it was in many pieces in the store here at York in a very sad state. And the proposal was to restore it to as it was and have it as an exhibition within the museum. It quickly became very obvious that the pieces were in very poor condition, with a certain amount of soft timbers and rot and losses, together with inappropriate conditions of painting and paint finishes during its latter stages of its life in a different situation than Waterloo. The information was very little to be found. We did find through the museum some images of it through different periods in the 1920s, 1930s, 50s and 70s, which gave us an indication of what it should look like. One of the interesting things was that a lot of the timber is teak. Now, teak is a very resilient timber and it has good rot properties. But I think they used teak because teak was a very common timber to be used within the railway industry. They were making carriages from it at that time and preceding that time. But we were able to source, quite by chance, some salvaged teak from the York Railway Carriage Works.
Fantastic.
So we were able to bring that back in fold and put it into the structure and replace the sections that were damaged. And we only
really
replaced.
Authentic.
Yes.
Then. Yeah.
And we weren't using new teak. Because
sustainability.
It's sustainability and all this. So that was really fortuitous and interesting. There was a lot of damage to the upper cornice items, which are the big curved sections which are not on it at the moment. Internal structure, which a lot of that was predominantly softwood framing, and we were able to remake those internal pieces and restructure the cornice as it was originally, and that literally just bolts together and sits on top. What we have here is two of these large sections of curved cornice. We have the examples here of this original sign writing that is still ghosted onto the teak fascia here, which enables us to make sure the sign writing is exactly the same as it was originally. We've got the original example here to work from, and this continues all the way around the top of the cornice.
So thank you, David, for talking with us today about this really interesting process of restoring, and thank you and the team as well for bringing this WHSmith Bookstall back to its former glory. It's going to look amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting process.
Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please like and subscribe to the channel.